Hello, this is Jeff Danskin. Today I wanted to share with you a story about a trip that Elizabeth and I took. Most of you know that my wife Elizabeth, she's working here in Japan, uh, and I've been out here for a month. I'm going to be here for a month more. And we took this last weekend, we took a trip to Hiroshima. And most people know that that is the town in which the United States detonated a atomic bomb, the first ever to be used. And so I wanted to show you some pictures and actually uh, give you some perspective on the devastation that that actually caused. Let me start out with giving you a little bit of history, because if you're like me, pretty much the only thing you know is that that was the town which the first atomic bomb was detonated, and I didn't have a whole lot, know a whole lot more other than that, But so in World War II, the United States was trying to stay out of it. We still had a bad feeling about World War One, and we didn't want to get involved. Over there in Germany, Hitler was trying to conquer the world, and Japan was in the same boat. They were trying to increase their uh, influence over the world and increase their scope. And America, we didn't like that. We weren't on their side, but we weren't involved. But what America did is they put sanctions against the Japanese people. And that is the reason that Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. And I was not aware of that. I knew Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, but I didn't know why. And it's kind of funny as I'm making this. Uh, Donald Trump has put sanctions against Iran, Russia, and Turkey. As a matter of fact, we just 2 days ago, we removed the last soldiers out of Syria, and the very next day, Turkey started going after the Kurds. The Kurds are, from that region. Besides Israel, the Kurds are really the only ones that are friends. And the Bible tells us that in the last days, Iran, Turkey, and Russia will come after Israel, and we're putting sanctions on them. And I thought with Donald Trump as president, Turkey would be afraid to go after them. But I mean, they didn't have any respect for Trump or the United States. They went right after him. So, Donald Trump is moving soldiers out to Saudi Arabia. But anyway, I'm getting off point. Let's get back to Hiroshima. So we put sanctions on Japan, and they bombed Pearl Harbor. And then Pearl Harbor, uh, it was a devastating blow. I think we lost like a little bit over 2,400 people. 48 civilians and 2,300 and some odd military people in that bomb. And so, the war went on, and something that I was unaware of is that part of the decision to bomb Japan or Hiroshima was we had 160,000 POWs, prisoners of war, uh, and Japan, the Japanese people, were starving. They didn't have enough money, food to feed their own people, much less 160,000 POWs. So they were contemplating killing all the POWs because they just couldn't feed them. And uh, we as Americans, when they were looking at that, they wanted the war to stop, and that's why they chose to use that atomic bomb at the time that they did. And I did not understand that before I did this investigation. And what they want to do, the military leaders of the Japanese people would not quit. These guys are fierce. Even now, today, interacting with the people, they are very dedicated and loyal to their job. And their job and doing it to the best of their ability means everything. These soldiers would fight to the death. There was no turning back, no running from these guys, and they would not give up. And so the United States knew that the military leaders would not surrender under any circumstances. And so they had the emperor at that time was almost like a god like figure. And so they wanted to make sure that they didn't kill the emperor because they needed him alive to be the ones that surrender to the United States because the military leaders wouldn't do that. And that's why they picked the southern part of Japan. That's where Hiroshima is because they knew the emperor would probably be up there around Tokyo. Uh, and so anyway, that's the reason they picked it. Their intent was to do as much damage as possible. And when you look at Hiroshima, it's surrounded by mountains. It's kind of like a bowl. It sits in a bowl. And at that time, there was about 380,000 people in that city. There's a lot of people back then in that city. And then it opens up, you got rivers flowing into the sea at that point. And so they detonated the bomb about 1,900 feet above the ground, and it just everything was just absolutely devastated. What I want to do is they have two things remaining. They have this dome. I'll show you a picture of, and they have this schoolhouse that we'll talk about and show you little pictures of. But they actually have a little simulation of the explosion that I want you to take a look at right now. I wanted to show you what I think is the best before and after picture. If you notice, this is the best picture. Here's that kind of famous iconic dome, before the bomb. And you see after the bomb, the only thing with all this was kind of blown away. And if you notice this building right here, it had a cement part, but then there was actually a wood structure right here. And you see that was completely knocked out. There's a school, this school right here that you can see. It was about 400 yards away, and that's another structure. A piece of that school, which is on the back side of here, still remains. And you'd kind of wonder, why would they put a bomb so close to a school? We don't. I think we've kind of learned from that. When we do military operations now, we kind of try to stay away from civilizations. But their goal was to kill as many people as they could. Men, women, and children. They were targeting civilians because they wanted the war to stop. They wanted it to be dramatic. Now, again, here's that school. I'm going to show you that school, a piece of that school. This is Elizabeth. Now, behind these doors is a set of steps that goes down into the basement. And the bomb was all the way over on the other side of this school, but yet the blast went around. It was so much force, went around this building, blew that door out, went down the steps, and burned out the this airway. Now, I told you two people in the school survived out of 400, one teacher and one student. And I don't know, but I would suspect that they were down here in this basement. Uh, this picture was taken only a few months after the bomb. They didn't know that you need to stay away from that. Everything's contaminated and radiation, and they cleaned everything up and they went right back to school. Now today, Hiroshima is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful city, and they've got about 1.2 million people that live there right now, and it's just filled with these buildings, and the rivers and everything is fabulous. I did want to point out that I was worried when I came out here to Japan what the Japanese people would think of Americans. Even though this is 75 years since the bombing, we're the only country that has nuked another population, and so I thought they may still have some remorse over it, but they really do not. They blame their government for this bombing more than they do the American people. I mean, they're not happy about it. Don't get me wrong, but they're logical. The Japanese or Asian people in general are very logical in their thinking, and so they realize that they're the ones that started it. They went and they bombed China, and they bombed Pearl Harbor, and this was just a retaliation. So anyway, they don't really have remorse over this toward to the American people. So I was kind of happy to discover that. Now, some of the videos that I'm going to show from this point on are pretty graphic, and it's really showing the horror of what took place during this event. So if you don't want to see that sort of thing, now would be the time to bow out. What a lot of anything you read on the internet, or even during these museums, they will tell you that about 80,000 people were killed instantly. But after listening to all the reports of the survivors and looking at all the pictures, I'm going to show you some of these pictures, you come to realize that in fact is not true. The only people that died instantly were the people that were probably within a half of a mile, and they were outside, completely weren't sheltered from anything, completely exposed to the bomb. Those people were in fact killed instantly, but that was probably only about 10,000 people. The other 70,000 people were close enough that they died within like hours or within a day or two, right? So they show what happened after the explosion is rain after a few minutes, it began to fall down, and that rain was a black soot. And the heat was over 6,000 degrees where that bomb was. And it just scorched everybody. They were thirsty, unbelievably thirsty. They just wanted a drop of water, any drop of water, because their tongue was completely dried out. Their throat was hurting, and so they were walking around with their mouth open and catching that radiation and soot as it fell to the ground. And it reminded me of a story in the Bible about hell. And that's how some of them described this. They described it as hell. In the Bible, we read that Lazarus, he was a poor guy, and then there was a rich man, and they were talking in hell. They were in two different areas, and the rich man was asking Lazarus just if he would dip his finger in some water and just one drop of water on his tongue is all he wanted. And he was not able to. And that's what these people, they just wanted one drop of water on their tongue. They were so scorched. Everything was black or red. One of this school that got bombed, there was a teacher out of 400 people in the school. One teacher survived and one student survived. And the teacher, you realize they had no idea of the concept of an atomic bomb. So the teacher that survived, he described, he said everybody had burns all over him. And he couldn't understand that because there was no fire at this point, right after the bomb. There eventually things burned up, but right at the first. So it was, how come everybody is burned, but there's no fires? And he didn't understand it. He thought that the school was hit by a bomb, and that was the only thing that happened. But obviously later he figured it out. But I listened to about 15 to 20 testimonies of people. They all said the same thing. They said they saw this bright light, and they actually described it as a beautiful light. And then I would expect that the next thing that they would say is, then I heard this loud explosion. Not a single one of them said they heard a loud explosion. They said they saw this big light, and the next thing they said, every one of them, after I came to my senses, and then they would describe what they did next. But people, and this is going to be graphic, I'm sorry, but I want to describe the horror of this being like hell. People were burnt up. A lot of people had their eyes pop out of their socket. Some people had their intestines pull open, and they were walking around holding their intestines in. There was large groups of people, that were like maybe a mile away, and they were all walking, and they were heading in the same direction toward their home, and none of them were speaking to each other. It knocked and burned the clothes right off of people, so everybody was naked, just walking like zombies, the ones that could. The ones that were too hot, they were closer. If they were still alive, they did anything they could, work their way to the river to get just a drop of water. And there were thousands of people in the river, just floating all over the river. About 20 years after the bomb, they sent out a message to say anybody that drew a picture of that scene, turn it in. And they turned the pictures in, and I took a picture of some of them that I'll show you. One of them that I didn't get, I wish I would have got, because there was a lot of pictures of people walking around with their mouth open, waiting for raindrops. And unfortunately, this happened. About a third of the people, 140,000 people in this town died of like 380,000. That's a third. And surprisingly enough, the Bible describes in accurate detail, in the very near future, that there's going to be a World War III where a third of mankind will be killed. Now, we've got about 7.3 billion people on the earth, so I don't know what the math is. Doing the math, a third of those people will be killed, just like in Hiroshima, a third got killed. And the Bible describes what these people will feel like, and it is exactly what happened in Hiroshima. So I'm going to share a few scriptures with you so you can kind of see that. And it's a time that we don't want to be in. It's going to be a horrible time, and there's something that we can do to miss that, because the Bible tells us that it will be the wrath of God that is poured out in the end times that's going to cause all this. I mean, it's going to, from a human standpoint, it's going to look like a World War III, and that's what it is, World War III. But it's God directing this, and He's going to have the rapture of the church to take place before this nuclear bomb goes off. Just a couple weeks ago, God gave me a vision showing me, it was kind of a rapture vision, and it was the second rapture vision I had, and both of them are telling the same thing. And what they're telling, and both of my rapture, one was a dream, one was a vision, this last one was a vision, is that when the rapture happens, there will be no more time to tell people about what's going to happen. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's not good enough to just say, I believe in God. I believe in Jesus as the Son of God. and I'm willing for him to pay for my sins. That's part of it. But you've got to put God first in your life if you want to be raptured up. He's got to be at the center of your life. You can't simply just believe in him but then live like the rest of the world. You will be going through this horrible time that's going to happen. And I believe because of the rapture dream that I had a couple weeks ago that it's going to happen within the next 10 years. Less than that, really. I think it's really going to be about 4 or 5 years from now. And as we see things unfold in the Syria area, we can see the dominoes fall. When you see Turkey, Iran, and Russia attack Israel, that's the first domino, and they're going to start quickly. Actually, even before that is going to be the destruction of Damascus. That's a city in Syria. So, anyway, I hope you've been educated by this. It's not a fun subject, but it's an important subject to understand because we want to learn from our mistakes. Amen. God bless.